Once again from Front Porch Politics podcast on our Political Wednesday. You know, most of you do, that we have went to a new format where we have Money Mondays, Faith Fridays, and this, of course, is Political Wednesdays. So to give you just a little bit of information about our introduction and the title of this podcast, we have definitely seen a trend in what is taking place in a lot of different states. Many of you know states are locked down, and as a matter of fact, there was a salon owner in Texas today who was arrested for and sentenced to 7 days in jail and has to pay a fine for opening her shop when the order said that she should stay closed. The only state that I see where there's a difference here is the state of California in the facts we're going to give you today. So there is a story from spectator.org, that also being known as .org, by the writer named David Cantron, and the article that he has given is Coronavirus Deaths, the Most Predictive Factor. And the reason why I bring this to your attention is because of what our introduction gave you, that your chances of dying from coronavirus is actually extremely higher in a blue state compared to a red state. So let me give you an idea of what it is. If you live in New Jersey, you are 13 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than if you live in the state of Florida. And I know what you're saying, well, people in New Jersey are packed on top of each other. That is true. People in Florida have a little bit more wiggle room, we may say, where they live. That is also true, which proves a point that when you put any group of people and you congest them together, you're asking for diseases to be spread more rapidly. This is why I don't believe the hype that come along with China didn't have that many cases or that was falling, because they're packed like sardines over in some of those Asian countries. Now, all that being said, the New Jersey death rate per 1 million is 895.2. Now, to keep in mind, the death rate in Florida per million is 65.1. So it is 13 times more likely to kill you in New Jersey than it is in Florida. Now, this could be because, Florida's governor, and this is what the article states, Ron DeSantis resisted the draconian stay-at-home orders imposed by a lot of Democratic counterparts. Now, again, California hasn't seen the fall off, but if we're just being honest with each other, California probably saw a lot of this virus come through already, and we didn't even know that. So let's give you some of the numbers, shall we? Because I do think that's important, because you may think, well, Florida and New Jersey are not a good comparison, okay? New Jersey has extended their stay-at-home order indefinitely. I mean, they're not letting people get out of their house, compared to Florida, which says, no, we're not going to do that. So let's look at some other red states before we get into the blue states, all right? Red states that include Arkansas, which is 26.5 per million, Iowa, 59.6 per million, Oklahoma, 60.1 per million, Nebraska, 40.3, Utah, 15.6, North Dakota, 32.8, South Dakota, 23.7, and Wyoming, 12.1. All per million. That's the death rate of people per million of population of how many have died from coronavirus. So here's how I want to relate that to the counterparts in the Democratic states in some of those districts. The District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., the death rate has been 365.6 per million. Maryland is 217.8. New Jersey, as we said earlier, is 895.2 per million. Of course, we also know that New York is extremely high at 1,282.2 per million. Connecticut, 716.9. Massachusetts at 588.5. And there's, of course, Michigan, where Governor Gretchen Whitmer would let you go have an abortion, buy marijuana and a lottery ticket, but she would not let you buy paint or seeds. Their death rate is 414 per million. So as we're rolling through the information we're just trying to give you, it shows that there is a large misconception about those who live in red states and what's taking place with you compared to the blue states, because we know that big government overreach and Nancy Pelosi is going to save the world, and even though she won't come back to Congress and work. In 26 red states, the average coronavirus death rate is 82 per million. So for every 1 million citizens in those states, on average, the death rate is 82. Because I know what you're going to say. Well, California is an outlier. Very true. There may be another state that's, Alaska is an outlier, whatever it may be. So you're going to say, well, there's outliers out there. So what are the actual average numbers between blue states and red states? What's the blue state death rate? What's the red state death rate? Well, I'm glad you asked. In those 26 states, okay, the death rate per million, 82. In the 24 blue states, including the District of Columbia, which is very, very liberal and very, very anti-conservative, except for a few people, it is 235 per million. So while New Jersey and Florida have a 13 times difference in the two, New Jersey's 13 times larger, Florida is 1/13 of what New Jersey has. The blue states and District of Columbia has a death rate of 235 compared to the red states of 82, all per million. So you're seeing where the death rates are not even comparable. You have roughly a little over 2.5 times more of a chance of dying from coronavirus if you live in a blue state compared to a red state. So there's just really no comparison in the two. The evidence is out there. The evidence is clear, folks. We need to open our country back up. I know what a lot of people are thinking. A lot of people thinking, no, we need to keep it shut down. We can't put everybody at risk. At the end of the day, we're eventually going to have to go back to work. And that's the big issue I have, is that we have too much government spending as it is. I know the Senate has come back into Washington, and they're looking at the bills they may work on. I know they have said right now that there is not going to be another round of stimulus spending, because let's just be frank with each other, folks, we can't afford that. But if you want to see really good evidence into where this is coming from, just look at what's happening across our country right now. You have one side that is demanding they go back to work. You have one side that's wanting to go back to work. Yet you have another side who is just demanding more government. The government come in and save us. The government's going to protect us. This is the dividing lines in our country right now, and there's no doubt that our country is very, very divided. What you're going to see at the end of the day is you're going to have those people who are conservative, who are trying to keep their businesses afloat. They're wanting to go to work. They're wanting to make America a great country, and they're going to have to eventually take a stand against these people who are just whining and crying about it. Schools were close enough to the summer that you can ride this out through the summertime and let the kids have that time off and start schools back in August. But eventually we've got to get kids back in school. We've got to get businesses back open. We've got to get people back to work, because the only way that this whole economic system exists is if we are working and we have people paying taxes. Because if all of that comes to a grinding halt, you can have all the Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez theology that you want. Socialism is not going to be the saving grace that comes in and wins the day, because there's no money that's going to be able to be spent. It's not going to exist. You need to keep yourself educated. That's why we give you this podcast. It was a little bit of scattered information. I know I was here and there and I was everywhere. But the big thing I want you to remember is that the blue state death rate is by far greater than the red state death rate. Go out and tell your friends. If you're talking about this, share the good information with them. Let them know that per million, it's about 2.5 times larger on average across the United States per 1 million people in a